Hi, I am Fred from therequirementsengineer.com. In this video, I show you how to change drawio file properties. You will learn where to find the properties dialog. You will learn how to add custom data with added data. And you will learn how to export this hidden information as a JSON file. This is useful when your diagram should contain more than boxes, arrows, and labels. For example, I can add a status, an owner, a requirement ID, or a responsible department to the diagram file. The visible diagram stays clean, but the file properties add structured background information. If you like practical tutorials about drawio, modeling, and requirements engineering, please subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss the next videos. What is drawio? Drawio, also known as diagrams.net, is a flexible diagramming tool. I use it for flowcharts, process diagrams, system diagrams, UML models, and many other visuals. It is easy to start with. I can drag shapes onto the canvas. Then I can connect them with arrows. And after that, I can add labels to explain the model. As a result, drawio helps me turn complex information into clear visual diagrams. However, sometimes I need more than a visible diagram. Sometimes I want to store additional information behind the diagram. That is where drawio file properties become useful. What are drawio file properties? Drawio file properties are settings and metadata connected to a diagram file. They do not only describe the visible drawing. A drawio diagram can contain visible shapes, but it can also contain hidden data that describes the complete diagram in more detail. This is the important point. Drawio file properties belong to the diagram file as a whole. They are not just normal text on the canvas. And they are not only a visible label inside a process step. Instead, they are stored as structured information in the diagram data. For example, I can add the property status. Why should I use drawio file properties? I use drawio file properties when I want my diagram to become more useful than a simple picture. A normal diagram already shows boxes, arrows, and labels. That helps readers understand the model. However, structured properties can add more context. This makes drawio useful for requirements engineering, process documentation, audits, and reporting. The visible diagram remains easy to understand. At the same time, the file properties can support analysis, validation, or documentation work. So the diagram has two layers. The visible layer explains the model. The hidden data layer adds structured background information. And now, let us go step by step. Step 1. I open my drawio file. In this example, I already have a simple process diagram on the canvas. The diagram contains tasks and decisions. For example, the process starts with a device that does not work. Then the model checks whether the device is plugged in. After that, the process continues through decisions and repair steps. This visible process is a diagram that readers can understand immediately. But now I want to add file properties behind this diagram. The property belongs to the complete diagram file. Step 2. I open the properties dialog. Therefore, I go to the top menu, then I click File. Now the File menu opens. Here I choose Properties. This is the central entry point for this feature. It opens the Properties dialog of the diagram file. Here I can see locked, I can see compressed, I can see the current file size, and I can see the path or file name. For this demonstration, I blurred the file path. These fields give me basic information and control over the diagram file. Locked can help prevent accidental changes. Compressed can reduce how the diagram data is stored. The size field shows the current file size, and the path or the file name field show where the file is stored. But the most important button for this tutorial is Edit Data. Step 3. I open the data editor. Thus, I click Edit Data. Now, drawio opens the data editor. This is where I can add hidden metadata to the diagram file. The diagram stays visible in the background, but now I can work with structured data. This is the part where the feature becomes more powerful. In this area, I can add custom properties to the diagram. These properties stay behind the visible diagram. Step 4. I add a property name. At the bottom, I see the field Enter Property Name. This is where I enter the name of the property. For example, I enter status. The property name defines which type of information I want to store. I could also use owner, department, requirement ID, process version, review date, or risk level. For this example, I only use status. After I enter status, I click Add Property. Drawio now creates a new property row. This row has the name status, but it still needs a value. So the next step is to enter the property value. Step 5. I add a property value. Now drawio lets me enter a value for this property. In this example, I enter approved. So the property now says status approved. A property name and a property value turn a normal diagram into a documented model. The visible diagram may still look the same, but the diagram file now contains additional structured context. Step 6. I apply the change. After entering the value, I click Apply. Now drawio stores this property inside the diagram data. The visible shapes may still look the same, and that is expected. The property is hidden metadata. It does not automatically become visible text on the canvas. That is useful because the diagram stays clean. At the same time, the file contains more information in the background. How do I view the properties again? After I add a custom property, drawio stores inside the original drawio file. To see it again, I go again to File, click Properties, click Edit Data, and now I can see the property and its value again. For example, I could change the value if I want. I could type in draft instead of approved. Step 7. Now I want to export the data. I click Export in the data editor. Drawio opens an export window. The exported content appears as structured JSON. JSON may look technical at first, but the basic idea is simple. The JSON export turns hidden diagram file properties into structured text data. That means I can read it in an editor, and other tools can process it. In the export window, I can see the JSON content. In this example, I can see status approved, together with other metadata like the ID or a label. Step 8. I save the export as a JSON file. I click Export. Then I save the file. For example, I can name it data.json. Now I have a separate JSON file. When I open this file in an editor, I can inspect the exported data. This confirms that drawio has turned the diagram metadata into a structured text file. What is the JSON export for? The JSON file is not the main diagram file. It is also not the file I normally import back into drawio for editing. Instead, it is a structured data export of the properties stored in the diagram file. So, the working logic is simple. I edit and save the diagram as a drawio file, and I export the properties as a JSON file when I need a separate data file. The drawio file is a file for editing the diagram. The JSON file is a file for reviewing or processing exported data. This also explains why opening the JSON file in Windows does not open a diagram. Windows treats it as a text-based data file. That is why it opens in an editor. It does not open as a visual drawio model. So I continue modeling in the drawio file. And I use the JSON export when I want to inspect, document, validate, or process the hidden file properties outside drawio. Before I finish, I want to clarify two important things. First, locked does not mean secure. The locked option can help prevent accidental changes. However, I should not treat it as strong security. It is not a replacement for real access control. And it is not a replacement for encryption. So if I work with sensitive diagrams, I still protect the file properly. For example, I use secure storage, permissions, and control sharing. Second, compressed does not mean I choose a target file size. The compressed option can reduce how the diagram data is stored. This can make the file smaller, but I do not enter a target size manually. The size field mainly shows the current file size, and the path or file name field shows where the file is stored. So I treat these files mainly as file information. The most important distinction is simple. The drawio file remains my actual diagram file. The JSON file is only a structured data export. I added the diagram in the drawio file, and I use the JSON file when I want to inspect, validate, document, or process exported properties. This keeps the workflow clear. The diagram file is for modeling, and the JSON file is for data review and reuse. Changing drawio file properties is not only about locking or compressing a file. The more useful part is the ability to add custom data to the diagram file. This helps me connect diagrams with requirements, systems, responsibilities, audits, and reports. It may look technical at first. However, once I understand the idea, it becomes a practical way to make drawio diagrams more powerful. The visible diagram stays clean. The hidden data adds structure, and the JSON export makes the information reusable outside drawio. If this video helped, please support the channel, like the video, and subscribe for more drawio tutorials. Also tell me in the comments, would you use drawio file properties for requirements engineering, process documentation, system architecture, or reporting? Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.